I guess we should probably start with defining what a good party even is, because I'm going to, for the purposes of this video, say that it is a party that can tackle just about every situation without failing, or at least always having a chance to succeed in every given scenario. And that will mean building a balanced party rather than a bunch of individually hyper-strong characters for pure combat. So let's quickly dive into what the jobs are that a balanced party will need to fulfill. And we're going to go into examples eventually, but for now, we just need to set up the ground basis for what we're working about. So let's go with the out-of-combat roles. And this is mostly what skills you have, because you can also argue that some spells are out-of-combat uses, like who is going to be casting those airwalks or those flies in order to have people be able to get up certain things and stuff of that nature. But generally speaking, a lot of the game is designed so that way you can get around if you just have a good variety of skills in your party. And so I have some practical advice, which is simply have each player cover a different stat of skills. So you might have one player who is a druid, and you should say, hey, can you cover the wisdom skills? And I, as the champion, will cover our charisma skills. And then we could have the wizard cover some of the int skills, and just separating it out that way based on who naturally has a good stat there. So that way your skills are useful early game. They can keep on scaling with your character, and it covers different things. That's at least my advice for it. And if you want to see which skills you should prioritize higher, you can go look at my other guide that I made recently. I love plugging myself. But yeah, some people in the comments said that they don't exactly agree with my experience, which, yeah, that's fair. Different campaigns will require different skills differently. I think that my list is accurate for my experience with the game, but it's not the end-all be-all. So you shouldn't consider any of my guides really an end-all be-all of now I don't need to think anymore. They're really more of a starting place. And so now we can go into the combat roles, where you have damage and non-damaging things to do. And my face cam's in the way. I'm going to leave that in the video, I don't care. I'm going to move my face cam to the middle here. And so for damage, you have burst damage, which is effectively you decide, okay, now I'm going to do a bunch of damage right now to try and get something out of initiative order. This is usually where you see the things like Fireball and Magus Spell Strike, these big effects that can completely annihilate something out of the initiative order. Because that can take a fight from severe down to moderate, and then leave the rest of it as just cleanup, which can be done simply enough once you don't have the threat of those creatures still around. Then you have the sustained damage per round, which is basically what is going to put the hard timers on things like bosses and make it so that way fights end. Because being able to burst for 50 and then not being able to do much else, it's fine if you can get an advantage due to that 50, but in a boss fight, until that boss is dead, there's still a full threat. So damage per round is actually king in those solo fights. So that's where the Magus versus fighter comparison comes in. Because the Magus specializes in burst damage due to spell strikes, where fighter specializes in their sustained damage per round because they have their accuracy bonus. That is especially useful into bosses. And then you also have single target versus multi-target. This is really where you start to see the caster-martial divide truly form, because martials are famous for their sustained single target damage. That is what they do. You bring a barbarian, you expect them to sit next to the boss and keep on hacking away at them bit by bit, turn by turn. And they can keep on doing that as long as they have the proper support around them. And that's really their job. Where the caster's job is the multi-target burst to get all the other things out of the initiative order. Clear all that apart, and that's really the difference in the jobs. And a lot of caster players feel like they should be able to also do single target burst, but the game of Pathfinder isn't necessarily supporting of that, because you will see when I get to non-damaging category, casters have a lot they can actually do in a combat that isn't just bam and try to hit the boss in the same way the fighters would. So I think that even if casters had more support for single target burst damage, it would actually still be a trap option due to how most parties are constructed. And of course, consistency. And I will say casters also have a leg up over marshals in consistency because they have the damage variety of different saves. Because you have electric arc target reflex against the high fort, low reflex enemies, where the marshals might still be having to just attack armor class and nothing else. So they have more consistency that way. And a basic save still does partial damage if they succeed their save. So casters have always a little bit of chip damage. So if you know something's live at like 1 or 2 HP, which you can sometimes absolutely know that with certainty due to abilities like Ferocity from Orcs. So that is a legitimate use case of these things that just do like a couple points of damage, because you might say, it's just 2 points, how much can it matter? But if you have a lot of creatures, you might actually be able to coordinate with your party to, hey, maybe don't throw your second attack into this guy, because I think I can get him with my electric arc even if he succeeds, and you can start table talking like that, and really start utilizing the different strengths of the types of damage. I do mean that in addition to just like actual damage types that apply weaknesses and resistances, but damage variety is also notably a big strength of the caster. And there's a reason marshals have their sustained single target DPR as their thing, really. It's because casters are superior to them in basically every other format of the damage type. So when people say there's a big martial caster divide in 5e, it's because casters can do all of that stuff that's mentioned down there. Hands don't go in that angle. All the stuff down there, and they don't have to give up anything for it. Where marshals can barely keep up in their supposed niche of the sustained single target damage. However, in Pathfinder land, we don't really have that issue. We have the opposite issue where a lot of caster players say they feel weak because I feel like they aren't looking holistically and they're just looking at the damage numbers and the DPR rather than thinking about how they can eliminate things from the fight by either bursting them out with a spell slot or by going for consistency from a saving throw cantrip. Because I think that's really where the damage things differ. But, of course, throw in 4 fighters and the group fights are going to die anyway, because they just have high enough damage per round. So why don't we do that? It's because of the non-damage stuff. That's where you get stuff like your healing effects. Because in combat, if you get low and you're about to get knocked out, there's a lot of penalties for getting knocked out in Pathfinder. It's highly recommended that somebody heal you or you find a way to back off and drink potions or something to get you back on your feet. Potions are pretty action economy and efficient when you need to spend an action to draw one and then action to drink it. So you're only drinking 1.5 potions per round. They might not be healing that much. It eats into gold budgets. So having a caster that can just heal, soothe, and then that be the end of it can actually be very useful. And then you, of course, have the heal between combats, which can be covered by the medicine skill, but can also be covered by things like the Kineticist, Fruit, or Ocean's Balm, Lay on Hands, etc. And that's why I say medicine is not mandatory. I think it's pretty mandatory to have something to help you heal between combats. Medicine skill is just the easiest to access neutral one of those, but there are other options if you look for them. And I just think that you need something to fill this job good enough to the point where it's not your biggest issue. There's, of course, the stabilization of if somebody's knocked out, you're going to want to have something that can consistently heal them for at least one, pretty much at all times. That way you make sure they don't die if they don't have any hero points left. And then there's the action economy manipulations, your grapples, your trips, your slows, etc. You have the buffs and debuffs, which of course are split based on category for the circumstance and the status. Because you could be doing something like, well, I know that that guy over there, our grappler, can apply off guard for a ranged attacker, so maybe if I get a bless to give them a status bonus, and they use a feat that gives themselves a circumstance bonus of +2, well, now there's a math swing of a +5, and if we can somehow give them a status penalty to AC through something like Synthestasia to give them a massive clumsy, we can then have our gunslingers start to crit on a 12. And that's really where these buff stacking ideas come from, where if you have a bunch of different characters each applying one of these things, you can then have some really nasty things come about for interacting with the non-damage part of the game. Because yeah, you can run it down with 4 fighters and try to make that work, but you're leaving a lot of jobs on the table, and any one of these can sink a character or sink an entire party in a TPK scenario. Because imagine your 4-fighter party gets outrolled by an enemy caster and there's a fireball in the middle of you. If a couple of you fail that save, you're now very low HP for the rest of that fight. And that can be extremely scary because, well, now you all need to run in there and you need to try and do your thing. And there isn't a way for you to really heal consistently unless one of you is heavily investing medic and trying to fill these party roles. You're just all the great weapon fighters because Reddit said they're the highest damage. You're gonna run into major issues as soon as a few dice rolls do not go your way at the start of a fight. So, of course, soak hits is also a thing that is here, but I don't think soak hits is a major thing you need to consider. It's just kind of a thing that happens. And if your party is very low HP, you should take note of that as, ooh, we might get hit by a fireball and have that be a bigger issue for us than it would be if we had somebody that had triple-digit HP. And this is really where I'm going to end the section about here are the different roles, and we're going to start getting to examples. And of course, let's actually just use a real example. And so in D&D YouTubers Play Pathfinder Season 1, we had a wizard. And this wizard changed subclass, but really does not matter, as this character was just kind of throwing out damage spells, using a summon occasionally, and that was the purpose of it. Intelligence skills were trained, generally a completely average wizard. We had a toxicologist alchemist, which, for those of you that know the game system, toxicology is not renowned for its power level. And in fact, a lot of people say exactly the opposite, and for very good reason. It requires you to hit an attack roll and then enemy fail a fort save, when fort is usually pretty high for a lot of monsters. And also undead are immune to poison, things like that. So, already not off the best start. Both are intelligence. Then we had a monk going for a strength dex hybrid, doing dragon stance to have the D10 kicks for big bludgeoning damage. So we had pretty good consistent damage from monk. And a ranger doing dual wielding with flurry edge, again having pretty high damage. So, what is this party lacking? The roles that are covered are left white. Those are things I didn't need to touch. I need to do everything else that was in red. Oh, and also in terms of skills, there were quite a few holes. So this was what I saw, because the people were just told to play what they wanted to. And what I want to do is queue fill and try to make a character that would plug every hole. So let's quickly dissect why these things are issues. Targeting of different defenses. If we run into a soldier type enemy with a hard outer shell that had a high AC and a good fortitude to make the toxicologist completely blanked, we basically are relying entirely on wizard cantrips for our party's damage at that point. Which, not great, gonna be honest, pretty not great. We didn't have access to much consistent healing at all. And the toxicology alchemist could get some elixirs of life prepared at the start of the day, and that was good enough for making sure somebody didn't die. But that's not the type of healing you want to rely on consistently. So we didn't have something to bring somebody back from near dead to near full. We didn't have that burst heal option. We didn't have somebody with good medicine. We didn't have somebody with lay on hands. Kineticist didn't exist at this point. Nobody was looking to manipulate the action economy, really. It was just kind of a bunch of people doing their thing, You have the monk going for a flurry of blows. You have the ranger doing action cheating, but like that's kind of it. And those are just ways to boost DPR. So those are just damage abilities rather than just action manipulation because you graph them on the plot, blah, blah, blah. They're only good for doing damage, so you treat them as damage abilities. In terms of buffs and debuffs, we were able to get one type of circumstance debuff from flanking. But yeah, no other buffs or debuffs. It was bad. Point is, pretty unbalanced party comp despite seemingly 4 very, very different classes. Because you'd look at this and you'd think, yeah, that's a party that could work. But due to the specifics of it, there were major holes in this party. So, now, I'm getting into how I solved this. Because I was able to make a single character that would plug all these holes and make the party really work. So, let's talk about the Legacy Cleric. Because this was pre-remaster. So, I was looking to play a Cleric, specifically a War Priest, so that way I could get in there and use grapples and trips to target the different saves. I would basically be not investing heavily in Wisdom because, well, if you look at pre-remaster Cleric, their Divine Font was based on Charisma modifier. And if you remember, we didn't have any charisma skills in the party. So perfect. That's where we fit our Intimidation for Demoralize. That's where we fit our Diplomacy. We put it on the Cleric because the Cleric will invest some Wisdom and will invest some Charisma. So I can cover the holes. Because we had the Ranger who's covering Survival Nature. The Cleric could then cover, well, Religion and Medicine. And that's fine. And then I also decided that I'd want to have just generally good numbers on this thing so I don't go down easily because, again, we didn't have a lot of healing. So I need to be ready to take a hit. And so I was playing a War Priest. I didn't care about the extra spell DC or the extra focus spell from base Cloister Cleric. I really valued that medium armor efficiency because I wanted to go in for grapples, and I needed that. And I was also going to use shield block because, like, I was fine with holding shield. I'm just going to be grappling anyway. And that is roughly how I fix this because, you know, I have things like Divine Font to give me these extra slots. And from there, I was able to just use buff spells, heal spells to be able to swing the math and fill this niche. I was tripping to fill this niche. I was invested in medicine to fill this niche. I was able to be a healer to fill this niche. And I was targeting different defenses in order to do it. We did it. Niche filled. And there were a lot of logical jumps between looking at this, knowing what things are missing, trying to figure this out, then knowing the game well enough to then be able to and pull out the exact thing to fill that niche. Pathfinder 2 is a big enough game where there is probably a class or a build that could fill a wide variety of these things. You could probably fill a third of this list by one character if you really build it right. You will never be able to fill 100% of it. You might be able to fill like most of the damage section or most of the non-damage section with like a couple of each. You might be able to get up to 50% if you're really pushing some definitions. But by and large, you can build a character that can do about a third of these. It's just a matter of knowing what exists in the game. And I'll be going into more detail of the min-maxing hell that went to this cleric in the next video, where I talk about the strongest build in the entirety of Pathfinder, because I think that's it. And we'll have to see. But that's the type of thing I look at when I see a party comp that has a weakness. It's a matter of identifying the weakness and then figuring out how to fill that with one more character that you're playing. And I think stuff like this is why a lot of experienced Pathfinder players will say, yeah, I'll play anything to help smooth out the party comp. And I have no qualms with people saying, I just play the things I like. That's great. Good. It's just that when we're looking at purely an optimization perspective, filling these jobs will be extremely important. Now I'm going to use an example of what it would look like if I were to build an entire party by myself for the sake of beating counters quickly and efficiently. And, well, with high consistency. And in order to do this, I have these characters set up here in Dawnsbury Days, because this is the scenario where I build an entire party by myself. In a normal tabletop game, you don't build everybody's character by yourself to have a balanced party. You're normally playing the fill game, which is what the rest of the guide will be, but this is an important note of here is how I'm covering all the roles, because this game does not have really an out-of-combat phase, so I didn't really care about skill variety. As such, I have a lot of things to focus on damage. I have 2 big fighters to be my big damage per round characters, try and chunk through the massive amount of XP worth that these fights are. There are so many hit points in these fights, you need to have high DPR characters. A lot of things play into reactive strikes, so fighter is just naturally going to be stronger than average. And then I have a couple casters that can supply magic weapons, and either apply consistent low damage in order to finish people off, or provide the healing and the debuffs from grapples and trips. So, let me just show you how this works.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Skip the cutscene. So you can see here, I can see initiative order. I know that I'm going to go before my orc friend here. So I'm just going to cast a magic weapon on him. I could delay to get this type of scenario, but, I don't need to. And I'm also going to throw up a shield, even though I know I'm not going to get attacked because all those zombies are too far away. I've played this game a little bit too much, if you can't tell. This guy's raising shield, so he's going to be pretty hard to hit and also resist my damage. So I'm going to start with killing that zombie, and then try and hit. Whiff. Let's just go for a third. Meh. I kind of figured that would happen. I'm going to magic weapon onto there. And then I am going to Dimensional Assault to get back here, behind the skeleton, because I have bludgeoning damage. And bludgeoning is very useful to skeletons because it ignores the resistance. And sometimes that happens. Now he's at 1 HP. I'm actually going to delay until after Skeletal Champion, so that way some people take damage. And this allows me to get a 3-action heal to both heal and deal damage to finish off that last guy. Again, having the healer be a damage character. Just doing a bit of that. A bunch of zombies are going to move around. I'm currently flanking because of the Mag's ability to teleport. Another utility option coming into effect. A crit happens. Bang. That critical hit was a natural 20. So, the +1 did not matter there, but still. Due to the magic weapon, I had the damage to overcome the resistance and get that kill. And I know these guys are very, very low armor class, so I still have 50% chance to hit and probably kill. Won the coin flip. I'm then going to spell strike with a telekinetic projectile, trying to apply the weakness of slashing damage. Worked. Alright. I am then going to just Dimensional Assault to get back over here and bonk this guy over here, just try and be in a spot where I'm safer. And then get into a position to where I could possibly get an attack of opportunity off. Bang. Yeah. From here, it's extremely easy. I can basically do whatever I want and still win. So I'm just going to get the trip off, get that kill, get that kill. And that's the end of the Extreme ++ fight. At no point did it really look like a major struggle. It could have gone bad if I just kept on rolling low against that skeletal champion, but overall, it really isn't that inconsistent of a strategy. The idea is, by having characters that are filling jobs that aren't damage, I'm able to make my damage dealers very efficient. And if things do go wrong, I have healing to then make it so I have another chance to then have things go right the second try. The current world record does not rely on such silly things as second chances. It just simply tries to barge through on the first chance. And so I might make attempts with the safe strat still, just to see if it's possible, because I believe in my strat. But yeah, this is what it looks like if I build a party by myself for the sake of beating high difficulty Pathfinder fights consistently. Now I just want to take a little moment to talk about general trends I see with new playgroups coming to Pathfinder, because I assume that's the type of person that's watching this video, is somebody who has a playgroup that is new to the game, you notice some holes, and you don't know how to fill them. So let's quickly talk about the types of holes I commonly see, because that example of the previous group where there are a good amount of martial characters and a damage caster, I feel that's a pretty common scenario to then try and fill. So let's talk about other options that exist aside from the cleric in case that doesn't really fit with what you're trying to do, or you have a different skill scenario. Because I would actually argue that Bard is one of the better things to play in a party full of warrior type characters. Because if your table has read online that casters are weak, which... okay. But if they did read that from somewhere, which not true, but if they did read that and they believe that, sure, then a Bard is probably the best thing to have to support them. Because the occult list, its big weakness is not having a bunch of damage, but if you're in a party with 3 marshals who exist to deal damage, your damage is irrelevant anyway. They're just going to try and damage check everything. Bard with the Inspire Courage, or its new remaster name that I'm completely blanking on now, but it's basic class feature cantrip that gives everybody around you +1 hit and +1 to damage. Chef's kiss, it will make all those marshals just better at doing their job, and it will show them the power of the +1 bonus. And as a Bard, you still have healing, you still have soothe. You can just basically spin the wheel on spells at that point, and still be efficient just from having a signature spell soothe, and charisma skills with a cantrip that gives everybody +1 to hit. In a party like that, completely viable. And if you're in a party scenario where the issue is that nobody has any skill variety, but you have the other roles covered, like for example, everybody has wisdom secondary and is getting battle medicine, but nobody has any of the intelligence or charisma skills, because I've seen that kind of thing happen as well, I would then highly recommend going for the rogue or going for the investigator, because they have a lot of trained skills and they get a skill increase every single level up rather than every other level up. So you can fill 2 characters worth of skills on 1 character. That's a big deal. And then of course you have the new kid on the block, Kineticist, which can fill just about any role if you build it right. And so I just want to go into the elements and describe what you would kind of want to do for each. Air is a lot of illusion trickery and a bit of mobility, along with area damage. Basically, all of them have some amount of area damage, but air and fire are particularly efficient at their area damage, from what I've noticed. Earth has a lot of defensive type abilities. Fire is going to be one of the most consistent damage dealers. I don't think it has the highest peaks, but it has some of the highest valleys of damage. Fire will pretty much always be able to do something in terms of its damage. Metal has a weird blend of debuffs, area damage, and defensive abilities. So interesting all-rounder. Water has healing. Big deal. Has healing. Has area damage. Has action denial. Fun stuff. Wood also has healing. And these 2 things can be taken on the same character if you just need a big healer and you want to have elemental type abilities, good amount of HP. That's a good way to do it. And wood will give you some other good damage options and some protective abilities as well. But it's mainly about protection and healing. Water has the action denial element. And it's all defined by the exact feats you take on Kineticist. Just know, they can't fill just about anything. You just need to read a lot of feats in order to get there. So many feats. And if that amount of feat reading is making you a little bit nervous, That's fair. Just go in for what elements you think are cool, based on the knowledge that all of them can do damage, wood and water have the healing. If you want to go strength, you're probably going to want to have either metal or earth or wood in order to get some armor. That's kind of it. That's all you really need to know about kinesis in order to start building one. And I haven't really seen too many issues with people running into, oh no, all my players want to play casters. But that is a thing that can happen. And so if you're a single marshal in a party of casters, I'd probably go with something like a fighter, just because I like fighters a lot. And I think that having reactive strike to stop people running past you and just ignoring you to get into your backline is going to be pretty important. Others might recommend champion, but I've noticed that a lot of caster players play very scared and they never want to be in the front, which means champion reaction effectively won't do anything because it requires another ally to be within 15 feet of that enemy and those types of conditionals. So I'd probably lean towards a martial that is very, very self-efficient and consistent. So something like barbarian, fighter, monk, one of those that requires not very much setup time and can just start bonking things. And you also don't need a whole lot of utility on a martial if you're in a party of casters. So again, big ups to the barbarians, the fighters of the world for that type of party. Every class has a certain amount of roles that it fills naturally. And of course, with archetyping, you can splash into other roles that you really shouldn't be able to do from just the base class. The best example I can come up with that is medic. If you are a party that lacks healing and you have an open offhand, you can just grab medic and suddenly your party isn't lacking healing. It's that simple. If you have medic and you get doctor's visitation, you are a healer now. You can do a single action to stride, battle medicine somebody, they now have some HP and they can keep on fighting. It's legitimately a pretty big deal. So, if your party lacks healing, see if you can squeeze in that open offhand. See if you can squeeze in utility from that open offhand, such as medic. And that's my big advice for if your party lacks healing, but you still want to play martial. There are a bunch of tricks, but I think if I keep on going at this point, I'll just keep on spinning my wheels and it'll get progressively less useful the longer I talk. So, with that, I'm just going to say, if you want to continue this discussion, go ahead and join my Discord. You can post what party you're trying to fill niches, and you'll have a bunch of people all be screaming at each other based on what they think is correct for you. We're legitimately pretty friendly. When people ask for actual advice, people tend to politely answer and then get off topic and just politely debate with each other for 80 messages that I love reading. So absolutely, go join there. And I'm going to be trying to upload weekly from now on, as in like a Pathfinder video that's like this one, somewhat scripted, but not really. And I'm going to try to do that once a week. I might upload something just for me. That's where the speedrunning stuff will come in. And that'll also be once a week at most. So that's what I'm going to try and stick with for the time being. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. Like, subscribe, join the Discord. Peace.